Howdy fellas, my name is SirDutchie and it's about time to compare Grim Dawn with Path of Exile. Because both games are fantastic action RPG titles, it's hard to make a fair enough comparison, but just like I did with the Diablo 3 vs Grim Dawn video, I'll try to make this video as objective as possible. Graphics. Grim Dawn. Grim Dawn's graphics are befitting the game's title, seeing as the graphics are fairly dark, grim and gritty. The game does not shy away from depicting spooky, haunting tombs or depraved ritualistic sanctuaries, complete with appropriate torture devices and walls painted with blood and agony. Aside from the more dark locales, the game has its fair share of bright areas too, which provide a nice contrast with the more dark and dreaded areas. Next to the locations are the character and armor models. Seeing as the game was conceived with a limited development budget, the character models suffer from diversity, with only a basic male and female template to choose from. The armor models, on the other hand, look surprisingly varied, which give the player plenty of room to eventually end up with a good-looking and imposing character, sufficiently equipped to handle the threat of bad guys on the lands of Cairn. Whether cosmetics are important to you or not, the lack of true cosmetic options is largely irrelevant in the lifespan of the game. It's all about slaying monsters after all. The lack of development budget also shows in the animations, which look rather limited and not particularly impressive. For me, this has little effect on the enjoyment of gameplay itself, but I find it worth mentioning. Path of Exile. Much like the graphics of Grim Dawn, Path of Exile also does an incredible job of portraying a rotten, dangerous and forgotten world. In many ways, the style of graphics are a bit similar, with dark and hopeless areas interspersed with bright and more colorful areas. As with Grim Dawn, Path of Exile features a wide variety of different locations, and most locations are quite creatively designed, offering something unique in the multiple acts the game features. It has of course the usual, such as plains, caves and tombs, but also something different like a large garden-type area or the surroundings of a multi-leveled, broken tower. Path of Exile's artwork and areas are also quite heavily influenced by Roman and Old Greek mythology. Just as it is with the environments, the character and armor models of Path of Exile are fairly similar to those of Grim Dawn. Path of Exile does feature a more extensive character selection, and unlike with Grim Dawn, the characters in Path of Exile are more clearly defined as archetypes, such as the Witch and the Ranger. It's not possible to select a male or female when choosing a class, but instead the gender of the character is tied to the class. Gear looks fairly nice, but not breathtaking. It's more of a fine line between realistic and completely unrealistic. Again, much like with Grim Dawn, the animations are quite comparable between the two games, even to such an extent that it's hard to say who would be the winner on this front. So I'll just leave that up to you. Gameplay. Grim Dawn. Gameplay in Grim Dawn is well suited for people that prefer to take things slow and steady. It's a game that has a good sense of control over your character, and I'm very satisfied with the amount of responsiveness you get while attacking enemies in combat. Some classes are made to simply rush into the thick of combat and take the brunt of damage, and others require a more delicate approach in many fights, which add a strategic feel to the fights. In any case, the combat in this game just feels great fun to play, whether it's up close and personal or casting spells from a distance. Path of Exile. Path of Exile 2 has great combat, but unlike Grim Dawn, it felt a little bit unresponsive at times. Most likely the biggest reason for this is the always online requirement, which can add a bit of latency to the overall game. Sometimes it felt like I didn't have absolute control over what I wanted my character to do, something that's not ideal in some situations. But aside from this, it's very satisfying to kill monsters as both melee and ranged. I simply love the effect of critical hits. Those really make you feel the impact of damage you do to monsters, and never gets old because it makes you feel strong and powerful. And because the game offers a staggering amount of different spells and utilities, it's doubtful you'll tire of the combat anytime soon. Loot. Grim Dawn. The loot variety in Grim Dawn is quite extensive, with many item tiers ranging from normal to legendary. Items possess a great deal of itemization, such as an increased percentage of a certain damage type, an increase in attack damage, or more in-depth possibilities like an increase in overall skill levels in a certain class tree, or items that even grant new abilities altogether, making room for an impressive amount of build options and in turn create great replay value. Aside from simply having equipable loot options, Grim Dawn also features components, which are collectible items that can be attached to pieces of gear depending on the type of component used. These components grant a great layer of gear customization so that you can tinker away at your gear until it satisfies you. Components can even grant extra abilities to use in combat. Lastly, there's also a good number of unique relics to collect and equip, which provide all builds with an impressive boost in efficiency and power. Path of Exile. The item system in Path of Exile is fairly unique and very different from the tried and true looting offered in most action RPG titles, and thus requires a bit more explanation. For starters, all pieces of gear besides jewelry have a random number of colored sockets on them which can be linked with one another. These sockets make room for some very flexible gearing options, since all abilities in Path of Exile are tied to equipable skill gems, and those gems can in turn be slotted into the sockets. Some skill gems grant an active ability, while other gems, called support gems, grant the possibility to empower an active skill gem that's slotted on the same item with the right socket that's linked with the socket the support gem is in. This system makes it easy to switch around different abilities on the fly without having to fully commit to any one particular skill. Because of this system, the quality of loot is determined not only by the stats on the item, but also by the number of sockets the item contains, and more importantly, the coloring of said sockets and whether they are linked or not. For example, a 6-linked chess piece is much more valuable than a chess piece that has 6 non-linked sockets. The game does, however, contain a range of item tiers that start as low as normal quality and go as high as unique quality. Unique items grant, next to the possibilities of sockets, a good amount of stats and sometimes offer unique bonuses not found on other pieces of gear. Path of Exile also doesn't feature a monetary system, but instead has a different form of currency by way of orbs and scrolls. Orbs are items that are found randomly in the world that can help you out if you decide to use the benefits of the orb to improve your character, or you can hold on to them to trade them for whatever item you need. They can reroll the colors of sockets on an item, they can link or unlink sockets, and even upgrade the tier of rarity with one higher level. The usefulness of the orbs is generally pretty heavily dependent on RNG, however, which is short for random number generation, which basically means that it can be beneficial to you and save you a lot of time, or it can really hurt the unlucky player by wasting a good chunk of time if the use of orbs doesn't help out due to bad luck, or worse, cause you to end up in a worse position than you were before you chose to use the orbs. Because of this reason, many players prefer to minimize the use of orbs and instead keep the orbs in their possession to trade for a guaranteed item when they have gathered enough collective worth of orbs. Classes. Grim Dawn. The class system in Grim Dawn is quite well developed and varied, giving players the choice to fully invest points into one class or branch out into a different class at level 10, making it possible to dual class. This system allows for a great deal of experimentation, especially when combined with extra skills gained from items and components. The classes itself are very different from one another, specializing in multiple damage types and defenses. And then there is the devotion system, which is an extra layer of customization on top of the standard class system, and means to increase in power and flexibility quite tremendously with whatever class you pick. Path of Exile. The class system in Path of Exile is different from Grim Dawn, where you choose a basic template as a class, such as a Witch or Templar, but this has generally no effect on your skills except those granted from quest rewards. What it mostly affects is where you start out on the passive skill tree. This way you can still branch out to obtain skills that fit your playstyle, even if those skills are not close to your original starting location on the passive skill tree. Next to the class system, there is also the Ascendancy system. This system makes it possible to choose a specialization for each class, with most classes having 3 choices to make, with the exception of the Scion that can choose only one. These Ascendancy classes make room for a great and impressive number of specializations and really provide the most longevity in the long run. Leveling. Grim Dawn. Leveling in Grim Dawn is rather slow-paced, and much as it is with Path of Exile, to maximize effectiveness of each class, it is usually a good idea to spend a good number of hours really reading through most class abilities as well as the devotion points before fully dedicating yourself to one particular build. The speed of leveling compared to, say, Diablo 3 is generally much slower, simply because of the way the game has been designed. Less focus on reaching endgame as fast as possible, and more focus on a more satisfying leveling process by way of the rich player choice during each new level. During leveling, you can encounter devotion shrines, which each grant an extra devotion point to be used in the devotion system, which make leveling and exploring all the more rewarding. Path of Exile. Leveling in Path of Exile is slow but well balanced, keeping the flow of experience constant throughout your travels. Every time you level up, you get to spend points in the passive skill tree and work your way to desired bonuses granted from skill clusters you have your eye on. Aside from that, you gain plenty of new skill items while playing through the game and completing quests to keep things from growing stale. Path of Exile is about equally focused on leveling and endgame, and I think Grinding Gear Games, developer responsible for Path of Exile, has done a remarkable job in balancing everything out, giving a good overall experience in both leveling and endgame. Endgame. Grim Dawn. Endgame in Grim Dawn consists of going through the story mode multiple times on normal, elite and ultimate, gear up your character and deck it out in the best possible gear, complete achievements and challenge yourself with the 2 roguelike dungeons the game currently has to offer, namely Bastion of Chaos and Steps of Torment. The game also features a faction system in which you can increase or decrease in reputation with factions. When a reputation is sufficiently low with a particular faction, you can fight a nemesis enemy that has a higher chance of dropping sweet loot, and that's also part of the endgame aspect of Grim Dawn, providing further challenge to players so inclined. Soon the game will release mod tools which undoubtedly will increase the amount of content Grim Dawn has to offer, whether it's during leveling or at endgame. Path of Exile. Endgame in Path of Exile consists of a healthy mix of farming currency, hunting for gear, PvP, trading, completing achievements, completing the labyrinth, and playing maps. The game leaves room to set your own goals. Maps are items that are dropped randomly and can drop with different rarities such as normal, rare, or even unique. These maps have different tiers to play through, rising in monster level with each higher tier, and provide you with many different areas to fight in, with a variety of loot possibilities and challenges. Aside from that, the goal of the game is of course to finish all the 4 acts on each of the difficulty settings, namely normal, cruel, and lastly merciless. Generally, the longevity of the game is also largely determined by trading. Path of Exile is a game that's a lot harder on people that prefer to play mostly self-found, since some of the best pieces of gear are so rare it leaves you with no choice but to delve into the trading community to obtain the most sought after gear. Miscellaneous info. Path of Exile. Path of Exile has a built-in microtransaction system because the game itself is completely free of charge. The microtransactions are mostly cosmetic and convenient, such as an increase in stash slots, but otherwise provide no other benefits that would allow the player to take advantage over other players. Final verdict. Well, this sure is a tough one, since both games are in many ways very similar and in other ways absolutely different. And since I enjoy both greatly, I'm having a really hard time to come up with a clear winner. Because of that, I think a tie would be the best, since both games are great and offer many hours of fun for people interested in action RPGs. Hopefully, with everything I've told and shown you, you can decide for yourself which one is best for you. Thanks a lot for watching. My name is SirDutchie. If you've enjoyed this video and want to support me, you can always do that by crushing and destroying the like button, and of course comment and subscribe to help this channel out. I wish you, as usual, a fantastic day.